Hello guys, it's me Zane and welcome back to my channel after a longer pause, which was due because of things happening in my life. Yeah, that's what you get as an explanation. Now, before we start doing anything, please consider subscribing to my channel, also hitting the bell button and also following me on Instagram because there is good content, or maybe not. So let's dive deeper into the fertilized water which you use to fertilize your orchids with. Okay, so as I would say, after a huge Gucci shopping spree, there is a lot to unpack here. Let's pretend that this joke was original and I didn't steal it. So if we are talking about fertilizers, I don't like to talk about fertilizers because there is a lot to understand there. First of all, it's chemistry. Chemistry is not one of my strengths, if there are any. Chemistry is something that I would understand if I would study it hard every single day, but I'm not doing that, so I forget everything after I read it for once. So that's about my chemistry knowledge, but I have some understanding there. I know some things, and since I researched for this video, I know even more things right now. So there are basically two types of nutrients for, basically for plants and for orchids. We are tackling the problem of orchids and also other plants. If we are talking about nutrients, we can talk about two types of nutrients. For plants, there are the macronutrients and the micronutrients. The macronutrients are needed in big quantities and the micronutrients are just there in smaller amounts and they are just chilling there out. So the macronutrients are the nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and also sulfur, calcium, and magnesium. But also there are the micronutrients. There's a lot of them. I'm not going to talk about them all right now, but these are iron, magnesium, B. What is B? I forgot. I told you my chemistry is like shit. Don't make fun of me. Also there is copper, zinc, and other stuff. We have to have a basic understanding of these nutrients. This is where the research for this video will came a little handy. So nitrogen is actually incorporated into proteins and chlorophyll and stuff like that, and the nitrogen is basically found in actively growing stuff. The next one was the phosphorus. With the help of phosphorus, carbohydrates can be converted and utilized. If there is a lack of phosphorus, there is a lack of energy because the sugars cannot be like converted, and if there is lack of energy, the growth is happening less, or it stops, or the growth is just stunted. Also, the appearance of anthocyanin can mean the lack of phosphorus because the anthocyanin is basically a form of sugars and the sugars cannot be like utilized or converted, so it remains there. Then there is the potassium, which has a catalytic function. I didn't find too much about that. And there is the sulfur, which is the structural component of amino acids, which is basically plant proteins, and sulfur is rarely deficient because it can be found in abundance, I think. And then there is the calcium, which is in cell walls. So if there is lack of calcium, the cell walls cannot be as strong as they should be. Then there is magnesium, which is a chlorophyll component. There is iron and stuff like that, you know. There is a lot of other stuff. That's a little short, like, basic info bouquet for you. In nature, all of these elements actually get to the plants because there is decay of organic and inorganic materials, and as water is delivering these soluble minerals to the roots pick them up, and that's how the plants are actually fertilized. There is a difference between orchids and like regular soil plants because in soil fertilizer is like readily available like at all times, and in the case of like orchids, which are living up on the trees, on the branches, there is like not constant moisture. In some cases, some orchids needed to adapt to this situation. Now let's tackle the problem of store-bought fertilizers and DIY home fertilizers. So if we are talking about store-bought fertilizers, there's a lot of them. And on store-bought fertilizers, basically you can get these balance or like percentage. I don't think it's a percentage. Like for example, if you buy a balanced fertilizer and there is written 20-20-20, it means that there is 20 parts of nitrogen, 20 parts of potassium and 20 parts of phosphorus, and also there can be some other trace elements, some micronutrients and stuff like that. In some other cases the fertilizer is not balanced but is still good. For example, the MSU fertilizer, the Michigan State University's fertilizer, has a really good reputation. Like not balanced, it's not 20-20-20, it's like, I think it's like 13-5-10 or 15-3-10 or something like that. Right now in this video I will use the word balance for the fact that in these fertilizers the micronutrients and the macronutrients are in the quantities that the plants need there. It's balanced for the plant's needs. Let's talk about these DIY fertilizers. There is a lot of them. There is a lot of ideas going around on the internet. Some of them are true, some of them are false. I will read up the list of these DIY fertilizers. So the first one is the milk. The milk contains natrium, potassium, calcium and magnesium, and yeah, milk is already a liquid, so you can just pour it into the water. Then there is the tea or the tea bag. I'm not sure right now because I've heard that you can use tea leaves, but also the tea bag, the actual bag. The tea bag contains actual nitrogen or the tea, and that's the tea. And that's on a period. The next one is potatoes, which contains phosphorus and potassium. Well, you can boil the potatoes and use that water and stuff like that, or you can actually like mix them or whatever. You can use also banana peels, and banana peels actually contain a lot of good stuff. So banana peels contain actually potassium, manganese, sodium, calcium and iron. Also there is molasses, and I've heard that for the first time when I was researching for the video. I've never heard that molasses can be used as a fertilizer. Now molasses actually contains potassium. Then chicken bones. It contains potassium and calcium, and also eggshells. If we're talking about the chicken, it contains calcium. Which came first, the chicken bones or the egg? And this time it was the chicken bones. You can use also Epsom salt, which is basically like magnesium. You can also use rice water, but rice water has a lot of different uses. It is really good for your hair apparently. It contains iron. Also you can use oak leaves. Like, I've never heard that, but apparently you can use also oak leaves, which contains nitrogen, magnesium and potassium. Also you can use the fish tank water, but that discussion is a huge discussion. Basically you can use ash, like straight up ash. And that's because it contains potassium and calcium carbonate. Also it can be used to make the soil more basic, so I guess I ate a lot of ash because I'm a basic bitch. Then there is the vinegar, which is basically the opposite of that. It can be used to acidify a soil or a medium. That's all of these DIY fertilizers which I could find on the internet. If there is more, leave a comment down in my know-it-all section. Oh, I'm so hot. Okay, so let's talk about some recipes. Different sources will have different recipes. Mix up some banana peels and potatoes and rice water and milk and oak leaves and the ash, and all orchids or plants will be happy forever. Let me tell you, that's not true. And that's on a period. And that's on a period. I started to think about this whole thing, and if we want to like put together a recipe, we will need at first the macronutrients in that recipe. So we will need the NPK, also sulfur, calcium and magnesium. I went ahead and I tried to find all these elements in my list. So our first contestant is the milk, because it contains a lot of stuff. So the milk contains the nitrogen, potassium, calcium and magnesium. So we can actually check all these from our micronutrients, and we are left only with phosphorus and sulfur. Now the next one on the list, which actually contains phosphorus, is potatoes. If we use potatoes, we can check the phosphorus on our list. Also, what remains? Sulfur. But what did I read about the sulfur like 10 minutes before? It wasn't 10 minutes, but like 5 or whatever. It's really deficient. So I think we can in this case, leave it out from our recipe. So our first base recipe contains milk and potatoes. There are the micronutrients, but this is where it gets really confusing. So the micronutrients are in small quantities in these fertilizers because they are not needed in big quantities. We cannot put together a recipe from these DIY fertilizers because not all of the elements were listed there which are needed by the plants. There are some useful stuff, for example the banana peels, because they contain a lot of stuff, a lot of good juicy stuff. If we want to give our plants a full spectrum, we cannot do that with these things. But maybe from these minerals there's not enough in these DIY solutions that it can be listed. Maybe there's a little amount of them and that little amount is enough for the plants because they are micronutrients. But maybe it's not enough for the plants. We will never know the concentration of these elements in these DIY fertilizers because we cannot control that at all. Yes, I said that if you use milk and potatoes, you will have these macronutrients in your fertilizer solution, but you cannot know the quantities and the concentration of them. Maybe it's just so low that it's not enough for your orchids, and maybe if you want to have enough potassium in your fertilizing solution, you have to use milk and potatoes and banana peels and molasses and chicken bones and coffee grounds. You can never know the concentration. Maybe it's never enough, maybe it's too much. My idea here is that it's better to use the store-bought fertilizer because you know what you give to your orchids in what concentrations. But if you use these homemade organic DIY fertilizers, you never know what's gonna happen, and maybe some deficiencies will appear on your plants, and that's never good. I currently use the fertilizer from Kopf Orchideien. Maybe I will change to MSU fertilizer because I really want to try that out. So yeah, I think that was my video for today and I hope you liked it. If you liked it, click on the like button. If you disliked it, there is no option for that, sadly. Subscribe to this channel, don't forget to push the bell button so you get notifications every time I post. Don't forget to visit my Instagram account and don't forget to leave a comment in my Know It All section. So yeah, that was my video for today. See you next time. Bye guys.